Something just happened in Formula One that could completely change the 2026 season. Mercedes dominated the very first race of the new era in Australia. Pole position, a commanding 1-2 finish, and a car that looked almost untouchable from the moment it hit the track. But the real shock came after the race, because Max Verstappen just admitted something nobody expected to hear from the Red Bull garage. Right now, Red Bull is not the fastest team in Formula One. That statement alone sent shockwaves through the paddock. Because if Red Bull, the dominant force of the previous era, is already admitting defeat after just one race, then something very serious may be happening inside the Mercedes camp. Ferrari has already warned that Mercedes might have discovered a huge performance gain in the engine. Some analysts believe the Mercedes power unit could be producing around 30 extra horsepower compared to rival manufacturers. 30 horsepower. In modern Formula One, that kind of advantage can decide an entire championship. And now the situation is escalating fast, because the FIA has begun taking a closer look at the Mercedes power unit and how it is exploiting the new hybrid regulations. Not because anyone has proven something illegal, but because when one team suddenly appears this dominant at the start of a brand new era, the governing body always investigates. Which raises the question everyone inside the paddock is now asking. Did Mercedes simply build the best car of the new generation? Or did they discover something hidden inside the regulations that nobody else saw coming? Because if the answer is the second one, the tension that started after the Australian Grand Prix might only be the beginning of the biggest technical battle of the entire 2026 Formula One season. The moment the Australian Grand Prix ended, the celebration inside the Mercedes garage was obvious. A perfect start to the new era. Pole position, race victory, and a dominant 1-2 finish with George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. From the outside, it looked like the dream scenario for the team. But inside the paddock, the reaction from rival teams was very different. Because engineers from Ferrari and Red Bull immediately started looking at the numbers. And the numbers were uncomfortable. Not just for them, but potentially for the entire grid. The Mercedes W17 did not only win the race. It looked strong in every single phase of the weekend. Russell had already shown the car's pace during practice. In the final session before qualifying, he set a 1 minute 19.053 lap, more than 6/10 faster than the closest Ferrari. Then came qualifying, and the car looked even stronger. Russell delivered pole position with a 1 minute 18.518 lap, almost 3/10 ahead of Antonelli in the second Mercedes. A full front row lockout. At that moment, the rest of the paddock began to realize something serious might be happening. Because that kind of gap at the start of a brand new regulation era is extremely rare. Usually, when new rules arrive, the field is tightly packed. Teams are still learning, still optimizing, still trying to understand how to extract performance from the new systems. But Mercedes looked like a team that already understood everything. And that is exactly what started raising questions. During the race itself, the W17 confirmed that the pace was real. The start was actually difficult. Both Russell and Antonelli struggled when the lights went out. Charles Leclerc managed to jump ahead at the first corner, taking advantage of Ferrari's quicker power delivery off the line. For several laps, the Ferrari and the Mercedes fought intensely. Overtakes, counterattacks, drivers constantly using the new overtaking mode of the 2026 regulations. But every time Russell used the attack mode, he burned electrical energy and temporarily became vulnerable, which allowed Leclerc to counterattack when his own battery deployment was stronger. That exchange perfectly showed how the new hybrid regulations are changing the dynamics of racing. But everything changed when the first virtual safety car appeared. A Red Bull stopped on track with a mechanical problem, and Mercedes reacted instantly. Both cars dived into the pits at the same time. A perfectly synchronized double pit stop. Ferrari chose to stay out, and that decision changed the entire race. Because the Mercedes cars returned to the track with fresh tires while losing almost no time under the virtual safety car conditions. From that moment on, Russell controlled the race from the front. He extended the stint, managed tire degradation, and maintained a comfortable advantage until the checkered flag. Antonelli, meanwhile, had his own dramatic story. After crashing heavily during the final practice session and starting poorly at the race start, he dropped deep into the field. But the pace of the W17 allowed him to fight back, overtaking several cars, recovering positions, and eventually securing second place behind his teammate. The result was a perfect 1-2 finish for Mercedes, the ideal beginning for the 2026 season. But while Mercedes celebrated, other teams were starting to worry. Because the dominance of the W17 did not look accidental. It looked like the product of something deeper, something hidden inside the new technical regulations. And that is exactly why the conversation inside the paddock quickly turned toward one specific question. What exactly did Mercedes discover inside the new engine formula? And that question is exactly what started the tension now building around Mercedes. Because after the race in Australia, the conversations inside rival garages all started pointing in the same direction. The power unit. Ferrari was the first team to speak openly about it. Charles Leclerc admitted something that immediately caught attention across the paddock. According to him, Ferrari was simply nowhere near Mercedes in terms of pace. Even if Ferrari executed the perfect lap, the gap would still remain large. And in his view, the reason was clear. Mercedes had found a huge amount of performance in the engine itself. That comment quickly spread through the paddock. Because when a driver from Ferrari publicly says another manufacturer has discovered massive performance in a brand new engine formula, engineers start paying very close attention. Inside Maranello, there had already been rumors about this possibility. Months before the season started, some analysts suggested that Mercedes might have found a clever interpretation of the new hybrid regulations. Possibly related to combustion efficiency. Possibly related to how electrical energy is deployed during the lap. And after the performance in Australia, those rumors suddenly felt much more real. Some reports now suggest that the Mercedes power unit could be producing roughly 30 extra horsepower compared with certain competitors. In Formula 1 terms, that is an enormous difference. 30 horsepower can mean stronger acceleration out of corners, higher top speed on the straights, and more flexibility when managing the hybrid system across the entire lap. Red Bull has been watching the situation very carefully. Max Verstappen did not accuse Mercedes of breaking the rules, but he admitted something extremely telling. Right now, Red Bull is simply not the fastest team. And if they want to fight for victories in the 2026 season, they need to become faster. For a driver who dominated much of the previous era, that admission says a lot. Because Verstappen is not known for accepting defeat easily. If he openly says another team has the advantage, it usually means the difference is very real. Inside the paddock, several engineers now believe the key to Mercedes' advantage may lie in how the team integrates the combustion engine with the hybrid deployment system. The 2026 regulations rely heavily on electrical energy. That means teams must carefully manage how the battery stores energy, how it deploys it, and how it interacts with the internal combustion engine. If Mercedes has discovered a way to optimize that interaction better than anyone else, the advantage could be enormous. And extremely difficult for rivals to copy quickly. Because this is not just about building a stronger engine. It is about understanding the entire energy cycle of the car. How energy is harvested, how it is stored, and exactly when it is released. Some technical analysts believe Mercedes may have focused heavily on software and deployment timing, instead of simply chasing raw horsepower. If the power delivery is smoother and more efficient, the car can generate stronger traction out of corners without overheating the rear tires, which then leads to better acceleration down the straights. And that is exactly what many observers noticed during the race in Melbourne. But this is also why the FIA is now paying such close attention. Whenever one team appears to have discovered a particularly powerful interpretation of the regulations, the governing body always reviews the situation carefully. Not because innovation is illegal. Formula 1 is built on innovation. But because sometimes teams discover gray areas inside the rules that regulators did not originally expect. And if those gray areas create too big an advantage, the FIA sometimes introduces technical clarifications. Right now, there is no official accusation against Mercedes. No protest. No confirmed rule violation. But the attention from rival teams is growing. Ferrari is studying the data. Red Bull is analyzing every detail of the Mercedes power delivery. And the FIA is quietly reviewing the technical aspects of the new engine formula. Because if the performance advantage we saw in Australia appears again in the next races, the tension inside the paddock could grow very quickly. And what started as a dominant victory in Melbourne might soon become the biggest technical investigation of the 2026 season. But the real tension began when people inside the paddock started connecting Verstappen's comments with the performance Mercedes showed in Melbourne. Because when the reigning champion openly says his car is not fast enough, everyone immediately asks the same question. How big is the gap, really? And the numbers from Australia started telling a very uncomfortable story for the rest of the grid. Mercedes was not just quick in qualifying. It was fast in every situation. Practice sessions, qualifying laps, race pace. Even when managing tire wear late in the race, the W17 still looked extremely stable. George Russell was able to control the final part of the race while managing front tire graining and keeping a comfortable margin over the Ferraris behind him. That level of control usually only appears when a car has a clear performance advantage. And that is exactly why the comments from Verstappen suddenly carried much more weight. Because if Red Bull, Ferrari, and several analysts all agree that Mercedes may have discovered a significant performance gain inside the power unit, then the next logical step is obvious. The FIA starts asking questions. Behind the scenes, technical delegates are already reviewing how the Mercedes system delivers its power. Not just the engine itself, but the entire hybrid architecture, the deployment of electrical energy, the thermal management of the battery, and the interaction between the combustion engine and the hybrid system. In the 2026 regulations, that interaction is everything. The hybrid system now contributes a huge portion of the car's total power output, which means the timing of energy deployment can completely change how the car accelerates out of corners. If one team understands that timing better than anyone else, the advantage can become enormous. And according to several technical analysts, Mercedes may have invested heavily in optimizing exactly that. Instead of chasing only raw horsepower, the team appears to have focused on how power is delivered. Smooth, efficient, perfectly timed bursts of electrical energy. That approach would explain why the W17 looked so strong in the short acceleration zones of Albert Park, and why Russell and Antonelli could consistently launch out of corners with such strong traction. But it also explains why rival teams are becoming nervous, because advantages like that are extremely difficult to copy quickly. If the performance comes from deep integration between software, hybrid deployment, and combustion efficiency, other teams may need months to fully understand it. And in a championship season, months can decide everything. That is why Ferrari and Red Bull are already preparing development programs aimed directly at the power unit. Both teams know that if Mercedes truly has an advantage of around 30 horsepower, simply improving aerodynamics will not be enough. They will need to unlock performance from the engine itself, which is never easy under strict Formula One regulations. At the same time, the FIA must remain neutral. Innovation is part of the sport. Teams are supposed to find clever solutions inside the rules. But the governing body also has the responsibility to ensure that those solutions stay within the intended limits of the regulations. So now the paddock waits.